Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin, Alex Wolf, and there were some controversial comments from Tom Thibodeau today, Alex.
Yeah, he's not waiting long to get that going. We're going to talk about whether Evan Fournier is the presumed starter for the shooting guard spot for the Knicks, whether putting the idea out there of Obi Toppin and Julius Randle playing together is, quote, fantasy basketball. And also we'll get into our player previews in our final segment, talk about the few end of roster guys and what we want out of that final roster spot. That's all coming up next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. And we wanted to thank you for making Locked On. Oh, you got a visitor, Alex. Big Knicks fan?
I got a big cat visitor today. He just decided to see him. So there he goes. He's gone. All right, YouTube special content right there.
Yeah, well, that's why you got to listen on all platforms. We now are available on all platforms. If you're a big fan, like Alex's cats are, then
you know what that cat's name is? Is Obi too. Although it's not after Obi Toppin, it's after Obi-Wan. But you know.
Well, you got to tell him to stop playing fantasy basketball because he's not allowed to participate in the podcast. Maybe in fantasy world he could, but in the real world he can't. And that is a great place for us to start. But first, I am Gavin, a play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of The Strickland, the greatest Knicks website out there in the whole wide world. You can check them out on all forms of social media at thestrick.land. And yeah, Tibbs talked today. There's some good stuff said. There's some not so good stuff said. Before we get into that Obi Toppin stuff, the bigger thing to come out today was Tibbs saying that Evan Fournier, at least at this juncture, was the presumptive favorite to start at shooting guard, Alex. And my first instinct, a lot of other people's first instinct, well, he's saying this so Quentin Grimes, quote unquote, has to earn it. And then I thought about that a little bit longer, and I was like, well, the only other situation I could think of in recent sports where a coach tried to do that when the younger player was I'm not going to say obviously better, but I'll say obviously more complete and obviously a better fit in the starting lineup than the older incubit was the Jacksonville Jaguars a year ago, where they tried to make Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew compete for the starting job. And that was under the guidance of Urban Meyer, who is just about the worst head coach in recent NFL history, maybe the worst coach in recent professional sports history. So not a good precedent set by Tibbs. If that is the incentive, the issue with Tom Thibodeau is I really believe he would do it. So Alex, I'll just let you take it from there.
I mean, there's no reason to believe he's not going to do it. It's really frustrating that he couldn't even give us a minute of hoping, prior to just crushing everybody's dreams. But it almost feels like he's doing it out of spite at this point. Like, because of the comments that he makes, that he's in some way, shape, or form keeping up with the discourse around the team. Like last year, he seemed very, very upset at the general blogging and podcasting and whatever community with his comments of well, you guys don't watch the games 3 times, blah, 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 all this other crap. And, I'm not saying that he's making this lineup decision out of spite, but I think that he definitely came out that strong. And the next comment that we're going to talk about in the next segment, it's definitely, he's got a very condescending way about him. And he's got a very I'm right, you're wrong, and I know it mentality about him. And that kind of always shows through. It showed through with Elfrid Payton. It showed through with, Kemba Walker last year, with Alec Burks, with Evan Fournier to a degree last year. There was times where you could, Evan did his job well, and he set the Knicks 3-point record. But there was a real case that Quentin Grimes was a better fit on the court, or even Emmanuel Quickley for large swaths of last season as potentially the starting shooting guard. So yeah, I don't know. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I would be less surprised if Tibbs had his mind fully made up right now that Fournier was already going to be the starter after 3 seconds of training camp, more so than I would be surprised. I don't think that it's the case that he actually went into this with a good faith competition as the idea here. I think that he went into this with thinking, no, Fournier's going to start and we're going to pretty much do, we got Brunson obviously, so he'll slot into that Kemba spot, but Otherwise, why would we change up what we did last year? Everything went so well. I just, at least in his mind, it did. So I don't know. It's frustrating to say the least, but I'm not surprised, I guess is my main takeaway from that comment, unfortunately.
Yeah, Ian Begley in the piece he wrote today suggested that it might not be true, or well, that's not really what he said. He said there's reason to hope that this is still very much an open battle, and the only I'm not even going to phrase it that way. I think the logic behind this is almost that that Tibbs was presenting in this press conference is that Evan Fournier is such a better shooter than Quentin Grimes that whatever gap exists between them defensively is not significant enough to warrant starting Grimes over Fournier. But you look at the numbers, that doesn't really hold up. Grimes last year per 36 minutes shot 38% from three on 8.7 attempts per game. Evan Fournier shot 39% from three on 9.5 attempts per 36 minutes. Given that Grimes is a dramatically better defender, and honestly, in defense of Evan Fournier, this is a guy who has been a 20-plus point per game scorer in multiple NBA seasons. His ability to handle the ball and make plays off the dribble, even if that's an area that Grimes has improved, I would still give Evan the advantage in that capacity. I would still say Evan is likely to be a better offensive player this year. But to me, those are all arguments to playing him with the bench, where you're going to need that offensive pop more, where in the starting lineup, I mean, he's at best the fourth option, right? He's going to be behind Jalen Brunson. He's going to be behind RJ Barrett. He's going to be behind Julius Randle. And we had those few games last year where he just shot what are basketballs made out of? Leather? He shot the leather off the basketball.
Yes, they are.
Great. Okay, that's good. I should know that, given that I've hosted a basketball podcast for 4 years. But he was incredible for specific games. And there were other games where he didn't really get his touches early, never really got a chance to get going. And Evan actually admitted in a press conference today, he said, I let that affect me defensively, and I'm not going to do that this year, and that's great. But Evan playing up to his highest defensive potential is not as good on Grimes, not as good as Grimes on his worst day on that end of the floor. So to me, it doesn't really make any sense. I'm holding out a bit of hope that this is, again, not a final decision, not necessarily what we're going to see. But if Tibbs is still putting out that kind of old school BS, is like, oh, well, we're going to start the vet, and then if Grimes really earns it throughout the season by far and away outplaying him, then I don't know. That's a definition of insanity to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think that ultimately it's just going to come down to like this. I think is going to reflect on the front office in some ways too. If they're talking about youth movement and everything else and being so happy, Leon Rose like a few days ago talking about being so happy with the young players and excited for the season and everything else, and all this reporting over the summer about Tibbs regretting not playing these guys more and all this stuff, and then to just go in and be like, we'll just do the same thing. Like Fournier could just start. He'll play like 30 minutes again. Grimes can work his way into the rotation exactly the same way he did as a rookie, even though he showed so much promise as a rookie and allegedly was the sticking point, or one of the main sticking points in potentially acquiring like a multi-time All-Star. I don't know. It would start the season off on a sour note, to be honest. I'm not even saying that Tibbs has to start Quentin Grimes for that to be the case, for like some goodwill to be earned there. But it's just and I mean, again, we can take a break in a second and get into his second comment, but it's like the overall flippancy that he's showing towards any idea of change. And it's like, so why did they keep him then? If they were obviously, I can't even say obviously, they should have been, the front office should have been dissatisfied with his performance last year. I don't think that he did a good job adjusting as the season went on. He sort of had like the bizarro version of the 20 to 21 season in some ways, where he stuck to his guns and did all his hard-headed stuff, but didn't have a player having an all-NBA season to sort of bail him out of that and, mask Tibbs' flaws as a coach. And, so now we go into this season and it's like, all right, well, seems like you should probably do something different now. And it seems like the plan is to mostly do things the same. And I think that's the most disappointing part of this whole thing.
Yeah, no doubt. You wanna tell us a little bit about maybe? I know one way I'd be happier: some more money in my life. How can I make some money, Alex?
Well, money is always good, and that is where betonline.net comes in. Betonline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season and basketball, of course. Basketball's coming up. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. And I think I mentioned this on our last show, but I'll mention it again. The Knicks, as of right now, in the running for making the playoffs, are actually, I don't know. On our last show, I said, maybe I believe in the Knicks after media day, and I would take the plus 155 for yes, the Knicks will make the playoffs. But you know what? Maybe I'll go minus 190. No, the Knicks will not make the playoffs if they're starting Evan Fournier and Tibbs is not willing to change what he's doing. So you decide. It's your choose your own adventure there as far as what you want to bet on. But definitely head to BetOnline to do so. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Gavin, we are moving to our next segment, and we are going to be talking about another comment that Tibbs made. And I don't even have the full quote in front of me because it's not really that important. The money shot is there, which I will just say right now. He was asked about Obi Toppin playing with Julius Randle, if that's something that he would be more open to this season, and more or less said like, well, this isn't fantasy basketball. So, I'm going to do what's going to make the team work the best, blah, blah, blah. But this isn't fantasy basketball. You can't just like pair guys together and just hope it works or whatever. It was more or less the gist of his quote. Yeah, I'm thoroughly unimpressed with that reasoning because I feel like it's just him sort of blatantly spitting in the face of advanced stats and stuff like that, that for the 15 minutes that he's allowed Julius Randle and Obi Toppin to play together over Obi's first 2 years, Obi's actually done quite well, and the two of them have actually done quite well together, including, our much fabled season opener last year, where they got to play some minutes because Mitch was the only healthy true center on the roster at that moment and was working himself back into shape. Otherwise, I'm fairly certain Tibbs would have just played Mitch for 48 minutes plus overtime. But considering Mitch was getting winded and could only play 30 minutes thanks to getting his conditioning back, he was kind of forced to play Obi and Randle together, and it worked great. And they ran a bunch, and they were, Obi was getting down the floor, and they were hitting each other with outlet passes and yada yada yada. And then Tibbs stopped playing them ever again together. So, Gavin, just another thing. I mean, I at risk of us beating the dead horse here, what do these comments say to you? What do you think is more worrisome, the Fournier thing or the Obi not getting minutes at the 5 thing? Because each one of those, or I guess you could say the 4 or 5, just being in a small lineup, because both of these quotes and both of these statements by Tibbs are effectively him saying things aren't going to change. I'm still going to bury at least 2 of your favorite young players in Quentin Grimes and Obi Toppin. And that, again, is already ruffling my feathers one day in the training camp.
Yeah, it's really a pain Olympics. It's like, yeah, you want your leg cut off, you want your arm cut off. Which one are you feeling today? I'm like, I don't know. I'd like to walk around with all my limbs, Tom Thibodeau, if that's okay. Maybe the Fournier one slightly, just because I think I had an expectation that Quinn Grimes, if nothing else, was going to be the starting 2 guard, and he would be the one young guy who got minutes. I don't really expect Tibbs to consider changing his mind on this, because as we've always said, the core of his identity as a coach is that he will have a penetrating point guard on offense, and he will have rim protection on defense. And he doesn't think of Obi that way. He doesn't think of Julius that way. And it would require him changing a lot about how the Knicks play defense. And I don't think if you're going to have one of those 2 in there at center, you would go away from the drop scheme that he favors, that Mitchell Robinson has gotten so good at, and you would do something a little bit closer, I think, to what the Minnesota Timberwolves did last season at points, which was very, very aggressively blitzing the ball off of pick and rolls and playing just it would be like the NBA equivalent of an NFL team that just kind of what Wink Martindale's doing on the Giants, that just blitzes on every down. I don't know why I really have football in the mind. That's my second NFL comparison, if you're not making one for 4 months. But that's neither here nor there. And that worked for Minnesota for most of the year pretty well. Like they were, I would say, largely outplaying their talent on defense. And then it kind of caught up to them in the playoffs, and teams were, Memphis was the team, was able to really pick them apart. The difference is we're not saying play Randle and Obi for 40 minutes a game together. We're saying make it a look for, I don't know, 4 to 6 to 8 minutes a night, see how it does. And if it's sustainable and it's working well, you do that. But the whole point is to get your best players on the floor. And I know what Tibbs kept going back to today with that quote unquote fantasy basketball comment was like, it's not about individual statistics. It's about, can the team win? And to some extent, I think I understand as much as you can understand his mind. I think I understand his mind and where he's coming from. And it's his premise of like, all you out there watching the game, you just want to see offense. You want to see fireworks. You're not taking into account that the only reason we were in some of these games the last 2 years is because we had an elite defense for all of 2021. And again, they had an elite defense post All-Star break last year. That was the key. But I think that's underestimating, again, with some schematic flexibility, that you could at least tread water defensively in the minutes with those guys, especially if you pair them with an Emmanuel Quickly, a Quentin Grimes, and RJ Barrett, players that can fly around at the other spots and provide some rim protection at smaller positions. You can make that work. And to your point, Alex, offensively, it's a no-brainer because you get so much more skill on the floor. And you make Julius Randle's life dramatically easier, not having to play with a big that is always around the rim. So I've gone on long enough, but to me, it's absurd to say out of hand, especially in the fashion that he does, that this is impossible. It's only impossible if you're only willing to play one way. And that's basically what we've seen from Tom Thibodeau as the head coach of the Knicks so far.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that it just shows a fundamental lack of understanding of modern basketball by him in many ways too. And I mean, I'm sure there'll be someone in our YouTube comments on being like, Tom Thibodeau has forgotten more basketball than you've ever known. And like, sure, that's probably the case for a lot of things, but modern basketball, you play some minutes small to try to take advantage of the inefficiencies that present themselves there. Where like, if you're playing small and you have guys out there that can all blitz down the court, then you give up a few more points on the defensive end, but you hopefully, I mean, if Tibbs is a defensive mastermind, which I do legitimately think that he is one of the best defensive minds like ever in basketball, period. Like, you have to then be able to say, okay, as one of the best defensive minds of basketball, can I work out a system where for 5 to 8 minutes a game, Julius Randle and Obi Toppin can be successful on defense enough that they're not going to give up so many extra points that it, makes it a wash for all the extra points we should get on offense for just being able to get out and run. But that's the other thing too, is that Tibbs doesn't actively encourage the team getting out and run, getting out and running, I should say. He doesn't want them to do that. He wants them to bring it up the floor, slowly set up a half-court offense, have Julius Randle handle the ball, and ISO his way through like 17 seconds of shot clock, and then eventually find someone for a three or put up a shot of his own. Like, that's like an ideal possession for Tibbs. And that's part of the problem, is that he doesn't see, not only does he see the deficiencies of like a defense that doesn't have a rim protector, but he fails to see the efficiencies that are presented by a fast running small ball offense. And that's why he views that style of basketball as untenable. And like, but every team in the NBA, or I should say like pretty much every successful team, runs some version of a small ball lineup for a few minutes a game. And Tibbs is one of the only holdouts that doesn't do that at all. And so we'll see how that ultimately treats the Knicks this coming year. But much like we said with the Fournier thing, I think we already know the answer. It's going to treat them exactly the same, because that's, you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're just going to get the same results. And starting effectively the same lineup, except for having Brunson out there, who I guess, definitely a defensive upgrade on Kemba, but maybe a wash with Burks. But then probably not entrusting him to actually run the offense as much as he should. You're probably just going to end up with the same scenario where it's just going to be Julius Randle running this offense and everything being as miserable as it was at its most miserable last year in all likelihood, unless some things change. So I don't know. I feel very pessimistic at the moment, but it was pessimistic style comments by Tibbs, at least from the perspective of people that watch this team and want to see improvement or want to see the younger players get playing time, because not only would that signal that the Knicks are valuing those players, but it would also signal that they value winning, because every single metric and every single eye test tells you that those players led more to winning last year than any of the incumbents that Tibbs seems to like more. It's frustrating. So I don't know. That's pretty much where we're at.
To quote the immortal Mike Woodson, the East is big, man. That's the logic from that was flawed a decade ago that Tibbs is still carrying to some extent. Anyways, let's step aside. Let's take one final break and start on excited to be back in this. It means basketball is coming very soon. Our player previews, we're gonna talk about some guys on the back end of the roster next on Locked On Knicks. All right, we are back on Locked On Knicks, third and final segment. We wanted to remind you guys real quick, because we used to say this all the time, but we don't say this enough. If you are a local business and you would like to advertise on Locked On Knicks, all you have to do is shoot us an email at lockedonnicks@gmail.com. And you get to correspond with us. Isn't that great? A real honor. Normally you'd have to pay a couple $100 on Cameo. Now you just have to pay us money to talk about your business. Even more fun. But wait, Alex,
you're telling me you were getting paid a couple $100? No, I'm kidding.
I gotta go. I gotta go. All right. Let's wrap this up with three guys I chose to focus on, with apologies to Jalen Harris and Daquan Jeffries. It's purely my own bias, and that I know less about those guys. But for this final spot on the roster, I chose to highlight. You can throw Trevor Keels in here too. So let's just say four players. So the final spot on the roster: Svi Mikhailuk, Ryan Arcidiacono, and Ferran Hunt and Trevor Keels. So Alex, the way I want to look at this, we can talk about all these guys. They all sort of have their pros and cons, but what kind of player, like what mold of player, what archetype do you want on the back end of the Knicks roster?
Well, I think with Keels, I mean, I still have a lot of concerns about him from Summer League. Like, he's very much not an NBA ready product right now. Like, he needs to work on a lot. He needs to work on his body. He needs to work on his explosiveness. He needs to work on his shooting. He needs to work on pretty much everything, if I'm being completely honest. Like, he flashed one or two things, but the flashes were even few and far between in Summer League, which is pretty concerning. Like, even guys with a lot of issues can still sometimes flash some really good stuff in Summer League, and I felt like there was very few and far between with Keels. I think I would feel most comfortable with him still staying on the two-way spot rather than moving up to the last spot on the main roster. I think for me it would probably come down. Arcidiacono is fine. Maybe if you want to bring him on just to make Brunson happy and give him like one of his best friends on the team, whatever. It's like the 15th spot on the main roster. It's not the end of the world if you do that, but I think I would probably lean towards one of the other two, either Mikhailuk or Hunt. I think honestly I would probably lean more towards Hunt as of right now. Speaking of Summer League flashes, like, I really liked what we saw out of him in Summer League, and I think that he's a versatile player. I think that he has his struggles offensively, but he's a guy that gets out in transition and can really do some damage there. He seems to have pretty decent finishing ability, like decent to good. And then his defensive ability, I thought, really popped in Summer League, like being able to play passing lanes with that long wingspan, generate like fast break opportunities with that. He had a couple really, really great games in Summer League, including, I think, at least one, maybe two, where he led the Knicks in scoring. I think he made a really good case for himself. Like, if you want to sort of continue what the Knicks have done in recent years and really reward guys for doing good stuff, unless you're the head coach, contractually, they've done a good job of doing that. I think you give it to Ferran Hunt and just say, hey, we appreciate what you've done for the team and all that good stuff. Although if he still is eligible for a two-way, the restrictions are still very light on two-way players, or they're lighter than they used to be now. So maybe you just say, we'll just do the two-way deal and we'll call it a day, because that'll work out better for us financially and everything. And then you can give that spot to Mikhailuk. I like Mikhailuk too, a good shooter, but I think that he's sort of heading down a path where I'm starting to wonder how much more room he has left to like pop, or is he just a guy that's just going to be on the very end of your bench as like a 3-point shooter, which is fine. Both guys kind of have utility, but I feel like if you were running into a situation where somewhere down the line in the season you had like really bad injury woes or something, like on the wing or even at the 4, and you really needed someone to step in, I think Farron Hunt's a better fit because of that defensive ability, and so I'd probably go with him over Mikhailuk at this point.
Yeah, I have similar logic. He's just a little bit more exciting to me. I mean, look, Mikhailuk is far and away the most proven NBA player out of this group. The guy has played. Let me count him out real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4 full seasons of NBA basketball, which is more than any of these guys could say, and is pretty consistently throughout those years. I mean, look, 42 games, 56 games, 66 games, 56 games. He's been a rotation player that whole time. He had a monster season for Detroit that I think has kept him in the NBA these last 2 years in 2019-20, where he shot 40% from 3, taking 5 of them per game. Last season for the Toronto Raptors, averaged 13 minutes per game over 56 games and 5 starts with the Raps. I don't know why in my mind I've always thought of him as a smaller guy, but he is 6'8". Maybe part of that is he's essentially a T-Rex. He only has a 6'5" wingspan, which is one of the larger negative wingspans I've seen in the NBA. He's 39% from the field last year, just 31% from 3. So last season the shooting was more theoretical than practical. While for Ron Hunt, I'm in the same camp as you, Alex. He really, really impressed me in Summer League. Looked a step above everyone else athletically. The question to me is, how much does that athleticism advantage translate to the NBA when from a skill perspective? He's someone who I think still has a lot of work and a lot of developing to do. The jump shot certainly looked better to me in Summer League, even if it was pretty slow and his form wasn't picturesque than it did or at least like what I'd heard about it, or like the few times we saw him shoot in the regular season last year. But I'm with you. You obviously have Evan Fournier, you have Quentin Grimes to be your shooters. To me, Hunt is kind of a more unique type of player where maybe like Cam Reddish or to some extent RJ Barrett are the players in that mold. But the Knicks really are at a dearth of just long, hyper athletic wings, which is why you and I were very into someone like Tari Eason or Dyson Daniels for the Knicks in the draft. Not that Hunt is that caliber of talent, but he presents some of that same athleticism with a whole lot of height. That to me is really interesting. And if I'm looking at one of those guys as sort of like the developmental project to invest in, I think it's pretty clearly Hunt.
Yeah, I think that's basically where I fall too. I do think though, depending on Hunt's availability, as far as being able to be on a two-way deal, that you could maybe have your cake and eat it too. Keep that shooting of Mikhailuk on the roster and then just sign Hunt to the other two-way. The other thing that I would present though is that I would still, I mean, even though he also had a shaky summer league, I would maybe be more inclined to sign Montero to the second two-way deal. Jan Montero, sorry, is how I believe it's actually pronounced, but sign him to the second two-way deal just because like he's a rookie and is super young, and it would be more intriguing to throw him in Westchester and see what he can do than Hunt. Which Hunt you could still move down to Westchester for bits, but also you just keep him with the main roster more. I'm sure he's a great player to have in practice. Like to have a guy that's that rangy and that multi-talented, defending guys, I think is probably about as good of a practice. Like you could reasonably put put whatever the opposing, penny on him at practice and be like, all right, Farron, like we know you're not him, but like pretend to be like Kawhi Leonard for a couple minutes on defense or something, like, and you're not going to get like 100% of that from him, but you'll at least get a little bit of like like the pink copy if you got like a receipt, you know what I mean, like the carbon copy that comes from it. It's not going to quite be the same thing, a little faded, but you can get the idea of like a long rangey defender in practice. Whereas Mikhailuk, if you just need to have a shooter in practice, you've already got a bunch of those guys already on the team that can shoot the ball like crazy. So yeah, I more I talk about it, the more I think Hunt's the play to me. Mikhailuk is fine, and I think he's a good shooter, but I just don't think he offers like anything else, and he has very little untapped potential to me at this point.
Yeah, he's like, look, he's like a pretty good athlete around the rim. The issue is he's just not really a great handle. He's if Fournier specifically got hurt, but even then, like you would just I would say like you throw quickly at the 2 a little bit more. Like I just can't really I think Hunt is just more unique on this Knicks roster than Mikhailuk is, and it's as simple as that. So on that note, we can wrap up this edition of Locked On Knicks. Stay tuned the rest of the week. We're gonna have some more of those team previews bouncing around potentially if everything goes well with some hosts of the Sixers podcast here and the Hornets podcast here. Maybe we'll get in a little Julius Randle trade talk, Alex. I think if we make a compelling enough case that the hordes of executives in MSG who will certainly listen to this podcast, maybe they'll be swayed.
Perhaps. I guess we'll have to see. Maybe if Tibbs listens and has enough room to throw shade at people, then maybe the front office is listening too.
I was going to say now that Berman's gone, he needs some content. Who's to say it's not us?
He did speculate that Berman might pull a Brady and still come back. So wow. I guess we can always hold out hope for that too. That was the one comment that did make me smile from Tibbs today. I forgot to bring it up amongst all the crap. But anyway, I think we can safely sign off. So thank you all for listening to Locked On Knicks. We'll be back, as we said, with some new, fresh crossovers, continuing to preview the Atlantic Division, plus maybe finding a Julius Randle trade suitor. It's still not too late. So we'll talk about all that, plus more player previews coming up. Plenty of other good stuff. We'll, in like 3 days' time, we'll be able to ask for more mailbag questions leading into the season as well once we get into October. So keep your ears out and your eyes out for that as well. But till next time, thank you all for listening. We will talk to you guys all soon. Peace out.